Good morning, everyone. This will be my video lecture in Chameleon Values and Norms. Today is Wednesday morning. It's September 28, 2022. And the last time we discussed about, we are still on norms. No? That's chapter 2 of your book, which you could find it here, no? Chapter 2. But before I proceed with my lecture, there will be, as is customary, there is an announcement. After we finish chapter 2 of the book, then you will be having your preliminary examinations. I will be announcing the specific date when the preliminary examinations will be conducted. But as I always say, examinations are conducted in person or on site, no? Meaning you have to come and take the examination personally. Okay? So I begin my lecture now with norms. We are still on norms, no? And of course, I know for a fact that by this time you already know the definition of norms. And last time I mentioned about, or I discussed about the general classifications of norms, no? General types of norms. And we talk about walkways, no? We talk about mores. We talk about taboos. And we talk about laws. By the way, laws are also part of what we call norms, no? These are written rules, no? Which are, of course, written, which are very formal in nature, no? And we talk about folkways as customs or conventions, no? Customs or conventions that are being observed in a particular community or society or a group. Mores, of course, coming from the word morals. Well, it has something to do with something that is ethical, no? When we say ethical, we talk about what is right or wrong, no? Because that is what we mean. And of course, taboos, these are very negative form of norms, no? Negative form of norms, no? Very negative actually, no? Just like taboo would be incestuous marriages or eating pork by Muslims, no? Those are taboos. Those are prohibited, no? Prohibited, no? These are prohibitions that are abhorred by society. Now, today we will talk about the other types of norms. No? I'll be talking about, so the ones that I mentioned, the four that I mentioned earlier, or I have discussed last time, are the four general types of norms, but these are not the only types or classifications. No, there are other types, and the first is what we call personal. No, other types of norms. No, so there are other types or kinds of norms. So if we have four, so this will be the fifth type. We have personal. We call it the personal or individual norm, no? Or personal or private norms, no? Or private norms. Anyway, everything that I'm discussing to you are already laid down in your book. So private or personal. And when we talk about private or personal norms, of course we are talking from the perspective of the individual himself. So these are individual norms that are being observed by the individual himself, no? Internalized, no? These are internalized by individuals, no? An example of a private or personal norm would be, of course, every New Year when you do the New Year's resolution, no? When you do your New Year's resolutions, those are actually a kind of a personal or private norm, because that one is internalized by the individual only. It is individual in character, no? Or nature. No? So when you do a New Year's resolution or you list down your New Year's resolutions. Of course, that is a form of a personal or private norm. Or, say for instance, you want to be an agent for change, for instance, no? So, you quit smoking, no? Because you do not want a polluted environment. So, you quit smoking also. This one is also a form of a personal or a private norm, because that one concerns only to the individual himself. Okay, so if there is the private or personal norms, of course, what we are more concerned about in Chameleon values and norms would be the next type, which we call social norms, no? Social norms, no? Usually norms are of this type because that one is being observed by society. Social, when we talk of social already, we are talking about a society, no? Social society, or what we call a community. So we go out in society, we are members, we interact through the different people in society. So this one, of course, when you observe social norms, there is an impact, no? Impact on the behavior of the individual. There is the effect or impact on the behavior of the individual himself. Now, of course, when we talk of social norms, these are actually accepted and recognized by society already as the usual patterns or patterns of behavior. Patterns of behavior. These are already accepted patterns of behavior in a society, community, or group. So definitely, because these norms had already been accepted by the society or community where you live in, so the tendency of the individual will of course be to follow. Right? Otherwise, if you do not follow the social norms, you violate social norms, then you might be branded as somebody who is weird or thoughtless, no? In short. So this, there is an impact, no? For social norms, or social norms are otherwise simply called norms, no? These are norms denominated as norms, simply as norms. Because these are accepted norms in society, there results an impact on the behavior of the individual. And the tendency of the individual, of course, because of this acceptance by society, is to follow these social norms. Okay? Clear so far? So we move on to the next type. The seventh, of course, the seventh type would be what we call formal norms, no? So we call them formal, no? Formal norms. Seventh would be what we call formal norms. Well, from the word alone, formal, of course, when we talk of formal norms, these are written rules and guidelines, no? And because these are very formal in nature, what they are written, no? They are very specific. Very specific. And because they are written also, these are clear, very clear, no? So there is no room for a dubious interpretation, because these are already written rules and norms, no? And of course, because these are formal in nature, this has been agreed upon, no? Formal, agreed upon by society. Agreed upon by society or by the group. Now, what do you think is the objective of these formal norms? Because these are written rules and guidelines, and they are written in such a way that they are very clear and direct. Of course, the objective here is to preserve, or formal norms would be, the objective would be to preserve peace and harmony between the other members of society or the group. that are members of that society. These are written, again, formal norms are written. What are examples of this? No? When we talk of formal norms or those written rules and guidelines, okay, let's take an example. Of course, do you think that a law is a formal norm? The answer is yes. No? Because it's been written. You still remember that laws are codified rules. No? So laws are one of the examples. No? Laws are formal norms. No? What else? Say for instance, company manual. No? The company manual. No? Wherein it is stated all the terms and conditions or the things that an employee should follow. Also the student guidebook. No? Because these are things that you need to follow. No? We have the student guidebook. That is also a formal norm. What else? Well, for instance, company, say for instance, company manual would also include the rules and regulations of that company. Rules and regulations, no? Or what we call the rules on driving, no? Rules on driving. So these are all written in form, etc. No? And when you observe laws, company manual, student guidebook, rules on driving, because these are written, no, they are very specific. And being specific and clearly written, they have to be followed. No? Otherwise, if you violate any of the rules and regulations, the terms and conditions of the law, or the stipulations of the law, or the conditions of the law, then because these are written, you might incur what we call penalties or sanctions that we call sanctions. No? Because these are written. Usually, when you violate a law, no, there is a penalty or sanction. When you violate a rule or a particular company rule or regulation, there is also a penalty. When you violate a rule also in school, because you are guided by the student guidebook, no, there is also a penalty. It's either they expel you, they suspend you, or they warn you. No? These are in the form of penalties. Rules on driving with more reason that there is a sanction. Remember that formal norms are very specific and written. No? Clearly written. If there are formal norms that we call, what is the opposite of formal norms? Of course, we also have what we call informal norms. Now, which one do you think it has more in number? The formal norms or the informal norms? Well, of course, it is obviously the informal norms that are more plenty. No, because these informal norms, there is no need for written rules. No need for written rules. No? So what are these then? If we talk of informal norms, these are unspoken list of casual, unspoken, meaning it's not verbalized, no, unspoken list of casual behaviors, no, meaning what is casually done or usually done, casual, no. Say for instance, example of an informal norm is when you go to Jollibee, for instance, or you go to Chowking. This is the counter, for instance. This is the counter, and upon entering Jollibee or Chowking, you see a line, no, or a queue in front of the counter. So of course, it is a must for you to fall in line because that is the usual, that is normal, that is customary. No? It is customary for you to fall in line where? At the front or here? At the far end. Of course, you are required, proper behavior would dictate that you would fall in line at the last person who is on the line. You do not go there, go ahead, or skip the line and go immediately to the counter, because that is not the normal or usual or customary behavior. Another example would be when you are reciting in class. No? When you are reciting in class, of course it is customary for you to stand or stand up. No? Stand up. As a sign of courtesy or respect to the person who is teaching you. No? So do not just sit there. Do not just sit there, but when you are called, you have been acknowledged to recite, then you have to stand up. Okay? So these ones, the one that I mentioned, falling in line and standing up, these are not written at all. No? No need for written rules, because these are already observed and customary. They are usual, and these are casual. No? Casual behaviors. No? That's the usual behavior. Okay? So aside from informal norms, we move on to what we call, the ninth is, of course, what we call prescriptive norms. No? Prescriptive norms. Ninth would be what we call prescriptive. Anyway, what I am discussing are already discussed in your book, so if you want a review of all this, you can just read your book. Now, this one, prescriptive, coming from prescriptive, no? Prescription, or you prescribe, coming from the verb to prescribe, no? To prescribe, no? When you prescribe on something, this is what you ought to do, no? What you ought or required to do, no, in a given situation, or in a particular situation or society. So here it is being prescribed, prescriptive, what you ought to do. So is this a positive action? Yes, it is a positive action. For instance, we have been asked always to be honest, no? So this is positive. Be honest in all your dealings, no? So be honest is an example of a norm that is being prescribed to you. Be honest during examinations, for instance, during exams. So this is, of course, an example of a prescriptive norm. No? Another example would be, of course, aside from being honest, be polite to your teachers, no? Be polite, no? Or courteous to your, be polite to your teachers, no? Is this a positive action that you have to do? Yes, it is a positive action. It prescribes on the proper action or proper behavior that you have to exhibit for a particular situation. So this one is, of course, it demands what? A positive behavior. Prescriptive norms demands or dictates a positive behavior, coming from the verb to prescribe. And then, of course, the opposite of prescriptive norms would be, it's just a there is only a deviation of one letter, which is change the E to O, no? So prescriptive. No? Next would be a prescriptive. So remember, prescriptive, this has been changed. Prescriptive norm. To prescribe, coming from the verb to prescribe. What do you understand by the word or the verb to prescribe? To prescribe would mean to prohibit, no? To prohibit or to forbid, no? They mean the same thing, no? So here, what does it dictate? Is it a positive behavior or a negative? This time it dictates a negative behavior, no? Examples of this would be prescriptive norm. or norms would be, because that one is prohibited or forbidden. So example would be, example, do not talk when your mouth when you are when your mouth is full. No? This one is negative. No? So meaning it forbids you, or it prohibits you to be talking when your mouth is full. Another one is do not cheat during examinations. No? Do not cheat during exams. So this one is also negative in it also dictates a negative behavior during exams. So these are all the different types of norms, no? So now that you know what our values and what our norms are, I think you already know, or you can already discuss with me what are the differences between what we call values, and what we call norms. No? So you can differentiate. So who can give me one differentiation between these two terms? No? Values as opposed to what we call norms. So okay, let us discuss some of them before we adjourn for the day. So norms, or values rather, what are these? Well, we talk about them as general guidelines. No? We talk about them as general guidelines for what? For what purpose? These are general guidelines for appropriate behavior. Guidelines or standards for appropriate behavior. So this is one distinction, no? For appropriate behavior. How about if these are general guidelines in the case of values? How about norms? What are they? No? Of course, general. We now go to the specific. No? Norms are specific rules or patterns of behavior. No? So these are two different things. No? Patterns of behavior. So one is specific and the other is general. Specific rules or patterns of behavior, or even expectations no? On how you are going to behave on a particular situation, no? Or on a particular manner, no? So one is general, values are general, norms are specific in nature. What else? What do you think is the other difference or distinction between values and norms, no? Well, of course, when we talk of values, no? When we talk of values, we are talking about abstract conceptions. No, we do not see, we cannot see abstract conceptions. Conceptions of what? No? Of what is, conceptions of what is important, what is valuable, and what is worthwhile. No? So abstract, meaning we could not see them. No? These are just general guidelines for our appropriate behavior. The word abstract would mean it is not susceptible to be seen, to be touched, no, or to be heard, because we cannot see them. No, they are not susceptible of physical touch or physical. You cannot see them. No, and of course, in the case of norms, these are specific rules. No. We mentioned about being specific rules. No, specific meaning is it susceptible? Specific rules. Well, specific meaning you could manifest that. No, that are specific rules that are normal, that are usual, that are customary. No? So in short, when we talk of values, they are abstract. We could not see them. So in order for you to be able to express values, you do it through norms, because these are specific rules, no, or expectations that are normal, usual, and customary. So what else? What other differences can you cite, or can you mention about values and norms? No. Well, of course, when we talk of values also, no, when we talk of values, we are referring to broad guidelines for human behavior. No? Broad, general, broad guidelines of human behavior. No? Very broad of human behavior. No? How about norms? Well, we talk about specific again. These are expressions of, I told you, these are expressions of values. No? So how do you show that you desire, or how do you show that these values are important to you or work well to you? Well, in the form of norms, because norms are expressions of values. Otherwise, they are what we call internalized values. They are also called as internalized values. Here, so far. So if you want to show a certain value, or you want to manifest a certain value, you do it through norms, no? Because these are expressions of values that we call. Another difference, well, we talked already about this before. Values are the ends to achieve your life goals. No? These are the ends to achieve what? To achieve your life goals. No? These are ends for you to achieve your goals, to achieve your goals in life, to achieve your goals in life. So for instance, if you value honesty, no? If you value honesty, now how do you express that in the form of norms? Well, you manifest that, or you exhibit that by saying, I do not want cheating in any form. No, I abhor cheating in any form. So if these are ends, this one will be the means. This time, the means, or the way, the means of showing, no? Of showing the values that you profess. No? Say for instance, honesty would be the value that you would like to embrace in your life. So how do you manifest that in the form of norms? Well, of course, you abhor cheating. You abhor cheating in any form. No? There are other, of course, there are other distinctions between values and norms, but I have to stop here for the meantime to give way to, of course, to the other things that we ought to discuss next time. Okay, I think that is all for today. Good morning, everyone.